So, again, sitting here with the one and only Jill Castle, broker in charge of the Charlotte office at Premier Sotheby's International Realty.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for sitting down with me today. Can we just start with like kind of what the pulse of the market is right now in Charlotte? I mean, I know that there are a lot of submarkets here. We're a land of many. But overall, like, what is the feel that you're seeing for like people coming into the office and like our agents?
Thank you, Jess. It's a pleasure to be here with you. And I'm so fortunate to work with excellent advisors like yourself in the Charlotte office. I think that what we're seeing is change. Everywhere you look is change, but we're so lucky to live in the region that we do because for a couple years we've been insulated from the other trends maybe are happening around the United States with regards to long list periods. And we still have many properties in many different areas that we serve that are getting multiple offers. Then we'll have those elephants that we're sure we're going to get multiple offers and will sell in a snap, and they're sitting. So I think it's just a matter of our advisors like you educating the seller. The market is ever changing. We are not insulated from the world, but we are in a city and a region where people are constantly moving, multiples a day. So that does protect us a little more than maybe other states.
Awesome. And I know the last time that I checked of people that are moving to Charlotte every day, it was over 100 people a day, which is kind of crazy whenever you think about it. We have all these people that are moving here, and like you're kind of hinting at, we kind of have a property shortage.
Exactly.
Right? So I think that goes like what I'm seeing. A lot of my peers are seeing is that, a lot of homes, as long as they are priced appropriately and they look great and they're in a good location, then obviously they're flying off the shelf. And it's those outliers that have maybe two of those three check marks that are kind of sitting. So it's a slight shift. At least that's what I'm seeing, is like there's a slight shift in the market where things are sitting where we just hadn't had to deal with that in the past couple of years. So it's just that in itself is a little bit of a change, but obviously everything's cyclical. It's not something that we haven't seen before. It's just not the most recent thing that we've seen.
One thing I love that you said and I said, and if we tallied how many times we said the word change, I think our industry is ever changing, and folks that can embrace change and have the information and knowledge, like you mentioned in the beginning, training and understanding to deal with the change at hand. I mean, we didn't even know if we were going to work during COVID, and it became just an amazing time period. We all survived.
I know, and I don't know if you remember this, but I switched over to general brokerage.
I do remember.
From working for a builder for years and years. I switched over in March of 2020. So I like to say, like, I was kind of in the fetal position for a few months. I think everybody was.
Yeah.
I was just like, oh my gosh, did I make the right decision? But obviously it was a great decision. I hit the ground running, and obviously thanks to you and the wonderful team here as well. But let's kind of circle back to what we came here to talk about, the big changes that we're seeing in the industry right now with this, with the NAR lawsuit. So what are some of the big changes that are affecting us as agents and our clients?
Yes, and all the agents across the United States are affected, but our advisors at Premier Sotheby's International Realty, to your point earlier, are hopefully receiving the information provided and the hands-on trainings, the practices. The biggest difference is buyer agent commission is gone from our MLS. And I think there's a lot of misinformation out there, and therefore there's a lot of fear on all parties, on the sellers, misinformation, on the buyers, misinformation, and sadly on the co-broke side of some of our transactions. So that is where our advisors that are educated and know the systems can graciously reach across the table and help the process go smoother respectfully.
One of the things that you just said that kind of like popped out of my head is that this is affecting everyone in the United States. This is a national law that is hitting every single state in the United States. One thing that I think and I'd love for you to speak to this, but one thing that I think that a lot of folks do not realize is how fortunate we are in North Carolina because of the laws that we already have, the local laws, the North Carolina laws that we have in place that kind of had already set us up for what the outcome of this lawsuit was going to be.
I would totally agree with that. North Carolina is an agency state. There are a handful of states within the union that are agency states. The others are not, and they're a transaction broker, and it's quite different. So for those states, they're really struggling. For us, it's a matter of implementation of the documentation that we've already had,
Right.
but we've had it for decades. And since you were trained, we would have the teacher would stand up, you're an agent, dual agent designated, and everybody would stand in their spots. The difference is, how are you paid? And I think that's where a lot of people are running rampant and scared, and the public has a misconception that I don't have to pay my advisor. I don't have to pay a realtor. And that's furthest from the truth. A professional earns the right to have an income.
Right.
I think that if we think of all the professionals that we engage with, a dentist, a doctor,
Attorneys,
you can't walk in without them sliding across, this is my payment fee for service.
right. It's a compensation agreement.
That's exactly what it is. And I think it's just wrapping the head around what it looks like now. And it is very different for those that have never explained how it worked before, that a buyer has a chance to now be part of his transaction, her transaction, their transaction, to pay a portion, some, none, or all of their buyer agent.
Okay, excellent. And just to kind of break this down a little further. So let's talk about what does the NAR lawsuit mean for our advisors? Like, what is the biggest change that you can think of that affects advisors?
Great question. So beginning August 1, Canopy MLS, our local MLS, has removed buyer compensation.
Okay.
So what that meant was when your agent was working with you in the past, if you were not with Sotheby's, you're an agent. If you are, you're an advisor. And they would go and look in MLS and they would say, okay, the seller's paying this compensation. Again, if you go back to the basic of it all, who's bringing the money to the table? It's the buyer. So we always felt like, oh, and in fact, the big thing is, and many across the United States have said things,
Thanks.
the board that got us to where we are, things like, this is free, you don't pay me, there is no fee for my service.
Oh my God.
Made us cringe.
Oh my gosh. Don't ever want to hear anybody say that.
No, and we never should have, because it's not free and it was misunderstood. So I feel like now we are so ready to go, like we're ready to go and run the race, and we're sitting on the go line, just sitting in that position because we are equipped. So MLS will not say anything about compensation.
Okay.
And websites can, but there's rules about how many clicks you have to get to see what it is. But it's very transparent now. If a buyer is looking on a website, our website, for example, they can see that information.
So the long and short of it is that the biggest change for the agent is that we need to be like even better at articulating our value and explaining that value proposition. And explaining to our buyers that, like, regardless of how it's paid, it's their responsibility for a buyer to pay their buyer's agent, and how that is set up in the negotiation, and how it's actually paid out at the end. That can be determined later on, but at the beginning, it just needs to be articulated that yes, buyer or Mr. Buyer, if you are represented by me as your buyer's agent, it is ultimately your responsibility to pay for that service.
Exactly.
Okay, excellent. Thank you.
You're welcome. Exactly. And I think that when the process is slowed down, it's easier for me to understand your value. I think one of the bad things that came out of COVID was we all have digital signing systems. And so there was not meeting in front of people because you couldn't. Zoom became good, bad. Like we have a love-hate relationship with Zoom still. But without it, we couldn't have done what we did at the time. But sadly, with it,
Made us lazy.
made agents, advisors so lazy, but also some never learned. So there's folks that just joined the industry during COVID that have the misnomer, this is the way that it is. Snap, snap, I do a listing, I get it sold, and I have multiple offers, and I don't explain, nor do they understand their value or the process. So that's one of the things that I've always respected about this firm, this brand, that if you don't know your own value, we're going to help you see it. And thankfully, you do see your value, and you do provide a lot of value in your service to every one of your buyer and seller clients. And you take the process, slow it down, and don't just whip across the table and here's a buyer agency agreement, quick sign it.
You really have to explain that and making sure that people understand. Just like we were talking about earlier, if I'm going to the doctor, I don't want for them to just be like, yep, you're sick. Like I need to understand, okay, well, what is it that's making me sick? What can I do to make it better? Same thing. Like if I'm sitting down with the client, like, okay, well, what are your goals? Let's see how and like what we need to do in order to help you reach your goals.
That's a really good point, Jess, because the questions that you ask provide the answers that you need. Because if I'm your buyer, you're my buyer agent, and you didn't take this time, I might say to you, Jess, I need 4 bedrooms and 3.5 baths. Okay, if you just went into MLS, yes, you could find a lot, but you were trained and skilled to where you'll say, do you really need 4 bedrooms, Joe? Or
what's the reasoning behind the 4?
Maybe I need 2 offices. Yeah. And you're like, oh, I don't really need to do that. So I think you slowing your process down as you do provides a huge value, because we're in a snap, fast order. I wanted it yesterday. Amazon, why did it take you an hour instead of,
Yes.
Why are you not here already? It's really important because, especially in our area, most of your clients, I'm imagining, it's their biggest investment and their primary residence.
It is. And whenever you think of it like that, I mean, someone coming in, they're trusting you. Mm-hmm. They're trusting you to help navigate through what is quite possibly the biggest financial transaction of their life. And number one, to think that someone is trusting you to do that and not get paid for it, that's one whole thing. But like just how much of a responsibility that is, and how much we are honestly obligated at that point to make sure that we are making sure that we're giving them the things and the tools to make an educated and informed decision for themselves, but to navigate them through that process, which is easily like a 70 to 100 step process for them to try to do on their own. I think that like it's an honor, but it's also something that I think people take for granted, that it's such a big responsibility.
I agree. And I think sadly it's because there's plenty of people that treated it very lightly and didn't handle their position as a buyer agent with the skill, care, and diligence that you do and that others do, because they didn't see a value and therefore they weren't willing to pay it.
But don't you think, and I hope this doesn't come across the wrong way, but that is the one thing about this lawsuit that I'm looking forward to, is that it is going to, for lack of a better term, weed those folks out. Mm-hmm. The people who are lazy and think that they can just make a quick buck and not have like a fiscal responsibility for their client. It's going to weed those folks out fairly quickly because they didn't want to take the time to do the right thing in the beginning. Do you see that coming?
100%. And I think because I use the analogy of kindergarten, 2 children threw spitballs at the teacher and the whole class stays in.
Yeah.
Nobody goes to read that. And I feel like there were folks out there that were not disclosing and doing our industry a real disservice, but we all are in timeout as a result of it. And one of the reasons I'm really happy that you asked me to do this is to help people understand that realtors are not all bad people, and that we in North Carolina have a fiduciary and fiscal responsibility, as you just said, to our clients and all the people along the way in the transaction, except for the real estate agent, the real estate advisor have a disclaimer, and have an oath and a duty, fiduciary duty that is really serious. And when you take it seriously and you explain it, it almost feels like, I just want to tell you all the things I'm doing for you. It's not bragging. As a buyer, I would feel a great sense of relief that I don't have to learn all the governmental zoning rules and, oh my gosh, there's a septic because I want to move out of the city. And what does that mean? All the things.
No, and thank you. I did mean fiduciary duty, not fiscal. I don't know where fiscal came from, but thank you for clarifying that. Couple other things that, sorry, before we move on. So we talked about what the biggest change for our agents and our advisors here at Premier Sotheby is, what that change is going to be. But what are some of the bigger changes that you think our buyers are going to see, and our sellers? Like, what do you see that there?
Well, I think they're going to see the process go a little differently. A seller has an opportunity to list and pay a buyer agent immediately and say, yes, Jess, I want to offer I see the value of working with a co-broke professional. And then it's the question of, where do you see the value? What are you interested in providing to them? There may be some sellers that will say, I prefer her and I choose to provide zero. And then the interesting game begins, because each professional realtor, buyer agent will be coming to the list agent with their own choice of their compensation. And it could be anything from $1 to who knows what the percentage could be. I don't really want to say this, but I think that's the interesting thing, was talking about a seller is educating them. You have a choice. You always did.
Mm-hmm.
Isn't that where it got lost?
That is.
They always did. But that doesn't mean our firm's going to work for free or you're going to work for free, because we're professionals. We provide elevated service. And so we have a standard as a company. Any company can set their fees. But a seller chooses, I do not want to wish to work with you today, or I wish to work with you. Let me see what the buyer's agent will bring, or let me see, I'm willing to do this. And then it's going to be very interesting to see how it plays out.
We just have to, whenever we are going and advising our sellers at our listing appointments and so on, it is even more important for us now to make sure that they understand that it's not their obligation to pay a buyer's agent or a buyer's representative. However, there may be a time where it is in their benefit to do that.
Exactly.
So it's just basically, and I've always done this, is like give scenarios, right? And so like there may be a time where it's not necessary, but there may be times where a buyer is not able to come up with the cash on hand at closing in order to make that closing happen.
Exactly.
So just things to think about for sellers, and that's what I always like to go over with them. Do you agree with that?
100%. You're educating, and there's certain different price points maybe, or areas in our market that are going to be affected greater in maybe a negative way it could be perceived. But I think all of us are getting our heads together, and lenders, and thinking of creative thoughts and ways that the monies can be used to cover it. Maybe a seller's willing to provide a buyer concession towards their closing, which is a brilliant thing. Okay, now you're going to pay for my closing costs. Now that frees up my money to pay my buyer agent.
Right.
So I think that's a tricky thing, and educating clients on both sides, seller and buyer, what's the difference between concession and commission? And I think there's a lot compensation. There's a lot of misnomer that it's the same. And I think we're going to see a lot of people not understanding that, to your point of educating them. I like that you said, you're not making your seller do something. You're giving them the opportunity to understand the value that's out there, to have a professional on the other side. I know you've had listings in the past. How was that when there was no representation?
Oh my gosh. So, I mean, you're doing double work. You really, really are. If I'm representing a seller and then a buyer comes in unrepresented, they have no clue how to get from A to B. They don't know how to get to the finish line. So at that point, you really are helping them through the process. And I do have the conversation with my sellers on the front end that says like, okay, if we get into this scenario where yes, I am representing you, but I have to help get this transaction to the finish line by providing a service to the buyer, even if it's just providing them with the documentation that's necessary for them to get from point A to point B. At that point, there is a difference in compensation at that point because it's extra work for me. I've never had anybody really push back on that because, again, I try to articulate my value as much as possible, and all of my sellers understand how much hard work I put into service. So that is one thing that I wish everybody could understand. But thank you for bringing that up. That's a great point.
I think we're going to see a lot of buyers thinking, okay, I'm going to buy, I'm going to save all this money, I'm going to represent myself. And to your point, your fiduciary duties to your seller, there's only so much you can give to that person in an effort to help your seller sell, because that's the goal. And the goal is to help the seller net the most amount of money. So you do amazing things from the start, like let's stage it, let's get the painter in there, let's tweak it to where it looks show ready, magazine ready.
Shine the best light possible.
Shine the best light possible. And then a buyer comes in thinking they can do all this, and it's North Carolina closes at attorneys. We're not a title state. So you have to direct them to get an attorney to write it for them. I'm sorry, I cannot provide you vendors. I'm sorry, I cannot do that. I can open a door for you on behalf of my seller. But once they realize I'm out here in the world all by myself, and in my profession, I know what I'm doing. But in this, just because you sold a house in North Carolina before, I remember you all were telling your clients, October 15th, everything changed. Due diligence is now part of the North Carolina contract. Everyone freaked out. We survived. But now it's like, as of August, things have changed, and I need you to understand, sure, you can represent yourself, but what does that mean?
Yeah.
Like, you were really out there.
Really prepared to do that.
Yeah.
You know? So another change that I wanted to talk about with you that buyers are going to see is if a buyer comes into us and they just like, oh, I just want to see this house. What's the big change that people are going to see there?
Thank you for bringing that up. This is not just Premier Sotheby's International Realty Policy. This is not just North Carolina. This is national. A buyer is not allowed to see even one house without signing a documentation. And so that's kind of scary for a buyer. I just met you. I don't know you. I'm not scary for everybody. You know, all there I want to date you. On the flip side, you don't know them either. So there's always safety is number one. And so if you're a buyer out there listening and you're like, wow, that's crazy. So a professional advisor will bring you to an office and have a discussion about the process. It is going to be frustrating because we are instant Americans that I want to see this house. I just saw it. There is a documentation you can sign working with real estate agents. You'll check the box unrepresented, and I can see that house. But I do need to see it. And there's still information you need to go through on behalf of your seller, on behalf of yourself for safety. But I think slowing down the process and making sure everybody is understanding that, it's a big change. And especially if I do want to work with you, I heard about you, I saw you online, I want to work with you, I want you to be my global real estate advisor, and I want to buy in Eastover, Jess. And I just saw this house and I want to see it now. I'm right in front of it. And then you have to slow them down. Right. There can be a frustration level, but then again, perfect opportunity to explain it and slow it down for them to get it.
Perfect opportunity again to just explain and articulate what our value is and what we bring to the table to help navigate through the process. So I do foresee that there are going to be people that are frustrated with that, and they are not going to want to sign anything and probably not going to end up working with them. But I don't necessarily see that as a loss, because if it's something that people aren't going to be realistic with how the process goes on the front end, they're not going to be realistic with how the process should go throughout the whole transaction. So that's my thought on it, is that I want to work with people who know, like, and trust me. And I want to know, like, and trust my clients as well. So I think that it's mutually beneficial to make sure that everybody's on the same page from the beginning.
Trust is so important. And that is really kind of the crux of where it started. There were some folks that were not happy with the system, did not feel they could trust their agent because they were not an advisor. They did not provide the services and the levels that are elevated that you do. And I think as a result, people are distrusting in the whole process. So it's going to be very interesting. And, all the professional folks that are going to stick together and follow the process, that's the thing.
Yeah. So getting away from the lawsuit for a second,
Sure.
And then like just thinking about other big picture items, what are some of the other economic factors that you're seeing kind of affect the market, our real estate market, just the market in general right now?
Oh, honey. Well, the big elephant is we're in an election year. And without going one side or the other, as real estate advisors, we're always paying attention to what does that particular running mate stand for regarding housing, regarding our industry, regarding independent contractors, regarding zoning. There's so many things locally, federally, the whole national picture that we need to take a look at and put aside the donkey and the elephant and say, what is best for the consumer? What is best for my industry? Can I put aside all the rhetoric and really filter down to what do they stand for the community, for the public? Are there going to be FHA changes? Will there be VA changes to help a buyer? I'm listening for that. Because it's an election year, it's been really interesting.
And would you say that just the uncertainty in itself slows a lot of people down? I feel like I'm hearing that from
So people panic and paralyze themselves. Fear is paralyzing. And that's, again, it goes to our duty to educate them. The interest rates are a deal and a situation because, again, it's primary residence market. So people are more affected by the loans than maybe other parts of the country.
Well, speaking of loans, and this was a question that I had earlier, so going back to NAR for a second and speaking of loans, do you think that we're going to see more loan programs, more grant programs, and government programs that are going to come into effect to help a buyer with a down payment? Are you hearing anything about that now that it is going to be their responsibility?
Absolutely. And there's even a couple local lenders that are already doing that and already jumping into those markets and offering those opportunities for buyers.
I've spoken with a few myself, so it's kind of a baited question. I already knew what you were going to say, but
it's refreshing.
It's great to see that that those aspects of the market are shifting to accommodate to make sure that buyers are taken care of. So, I mean, if anybody has any questions about that, we have some great local lenders that we can partner with and send their way to answer any questions for down payment assistance, right?
Exactly.
Do you think, based off of like the data that we've been looking at right now, in our local Charlotte market, and again, I know that there are submarkets all throughout the Charlotte region, but do you think that overall we are currently in a buyer's market or a seller's market?
That's a really good question because of the submarket.
Yeah.
It's almost depending on where you are. I feel like sellers still totally think it's COVID time.
Unrealistically sometimes.
And, until they take a moment and they're slowed down by their listing advisor to see the stats and the information. And what used to be considered a normal stretch is testing the market. So you, as an advisor, typically go in with a plan. I respect that here's the data and this is where you want to be. Seller, however, I think we also need to come up with a plan that if not, after this long, we're already going to go to here because you don't want to chase the market down.
So what is a balanced market? Is that 6 months of inventory?
Yeah.
Okay. So if we're still seeing in our Charlotte market that our inventory is historically low, and we're below that 6 months, we're still technically in a seller's market. But what I'm hearing you saying and what I'm seeing is that even though we are still technically in a seller's market, that buyers have a little bit more leg room than what they have in the past couple of years.
Exactly, because the list price might actually be a real price. Whereas during the COVID era, it would have been just a suggestion, and the sale price we'd all see in MLS after it closed and just be aghast.
You could see like how the claws came out.
Yeah.
We're just digging it. Yeah.
Yeah, and the lines out the door. So while you're right, and I didn't really answer that, so thank you for bringing it back. It is, while it still is a seller's market, it's not as terrifying for a buyer. But I think that's why the buyer needs to be ready with their buyer agency agreement day one, as they always really should have been, but now they have to be before they go see a house. And you as their advisor have everything in order with and for them, so that when they do go, they're prepared to make their offer. Bingo, and compensations handled, and everything's ready to go, because they're going to be a step ahead, and therefore they could win in a multiple offer situation.
One of the things that I like to talk with buyers about is coming in, especially buyers that don't have a lot of experience in the market. Like if you've bought 10 homes, like maybe you're not having this conversation because it's not your first rodeo.
Right.
But if this is your first home, or if you only bought one or two in the past 10 years, then maybe it's time to like really come in, listen to that consultation, pay attention, and understand how important it is to have a team around you. Because at the end of the day, it's not just me as a buyer's agent and you as the buyer. There is the lender, there's your legal team, your attorney. Like you want to understand all of the players involved so that you can get through the process and not have a panic.
I think that's an excellent point. And even I think now part of the conversation is, have you bought a home since August 1st?
Yeah.
2024.
It's a change.
It's a change. And so they'll most likely at this point, unless they just did and they're flipping it, they're going to say, no, why? And then it's a great segue into that value proposition.
So if somebody was to ask you, when is a good time to buy?
Every time. Every day is a good time to buy or sell in our Charlotte region. I feel like there's plenty of places in the United States that, even in North Carolina, where they have seasons, that it might be higher sales because of the weather, and because of the summertime, or because in the mountains, the wintertime. And here we have beautiful weather. We have 4 seasons. We have great opportunity and great economic opportunity for people. And we're seeing more people, we used to call them halfbacks. They go from the northern part of the United States, go to Florida or Georgia, and then they come back to here because either family or the weather. And we're seeing more and more folks just come straight here for their retirement, because we're also so close to the upstate of South Carolina, which has benefits to buyers for buying in their different stages of life as well.
Awesome. When do you think is a good time to list in North Carolina, or in Charlotte specifically?
I think that's a great question because it has a multifaceted answer.
Okay.
Any season is a great time. However,
any time that is right for you.
Right. But then you can you can play the devil's advocate, say, well, my grass is dying because it's late mid-August, and while we've had a lot of rain, so grass is a lot greener than normal, but when does your house look the best? Well, what can you do to make your house look the best? And really, when you're ready, we're lucky in Charlotte, there's not really a season. We've seen different times of year, late summer, that can slow down because people are quick getting in a last vacation, getting their children ready to go back to school or to go to college. That has typically, year over year, for a long time, had a little bit of a lull. And if you're an advisor and you want your business to pick up, the best time to have that happen is to go on vacation.
Absolutely. We all know that.
So if you're a seller and you want to sell and you want it to sell, call your advisor and say, when are you going? When are you going to That's it. I'm just teasing on that. But really, in our region, is there really a bad time to sell? I know back when I was selling, and I know watching you all sell as advisors, many will think, oh gosh, the holidays are the worst. No, only serious buyers are out during the holidays, and they're coming to the region to buy. So that's interesting.
What I always tell people is just like, if you need to sell during the holidays, just understand that people might be a little slower on the communication, but it's not necessarily a bad time, just because of how much of a property shortage we have and how many people are moving here.
Exactly.
So,
well, and I think people have a misnomer that the spring market And so we'll have sellers wait for that, or buyers want to avoid that. And the sad thing is, we wish we had a realtor crystal. All over the world would be a beautiful thing. We don't have a crystal ball, so we don't know what is going to happen in the spring. We don't know whoever wins the election, how that's going to affect things.
Right.
We do know rates have gone down, and we're hearing they're going to go down again. So hopefully it will open the market, and to your point earlier, even and out for seller buyer, and we'll have more inventory to provide to our buyers, and sellers won't be afraid to sell because they cannot buy something, right? Because there's nothing on the market. So it's always the domino effect of what's going to happen. But regarding the spring market 2025, thinking about, oh my goodness, if the rates drop and we have all these programs, then hopefully it does happen.
Right.
That sellers are like, just time to list. Buyers are like, oh, great. Instead of having 2 houses to look at, and now it's 2 days later, and now I have 0 houses, I might have 5, but we don't know. We'll see what happens.
I always tell people, like, if you're thinking about listing during my vacation, can we just not? Can we just hold off on that?
Yeah.
Can we talk about for a second the culture that has been created here at Premier Sotheby's International Realty? Just because I knew whenever I was coming here that my blood was blue. Like I came and I spoke with you, and I felt like I was already at home. So can you talk to me a little bit more about the culture, and if you had other advisors that were thinking about coming to work here, or buyers or sellers who are wanting to partner with an advisor here? Speak a little bit about that culture.
Well, I think I'll turn that back on you, because I think it's interesting that you ask. I think sometimes it's easy to think it's one thing, but is it really what you want? So every day I start my day truly with gratitude before my feet hit the floor. And then I look in the mirror and I'm real with myself, not looking to see what my hair looks like, but to see what my heart and my head look like. Do they match? Really important to me to be an example to my advisors of ethics and caring, and a good combination of leading by example. And I always tell you all that if I don't know, I do know somebody that does know. So that makes my job super exciting to learn something new every day. I think that one of the ways that I lead is by things that I've learned in the past that I wish someone had done for me or guided me through. So I am available, and I answer my phone and text over the weekend and on holidays, because real estate is 24/7.
Yeah.
And as a result, we avoid issues or concerns, because 99 times out of 100, the advisor already knows the answer, but just needs that confirmation because things are changing and because someone questioned them. And that brings me joy. I get great joy from celebrating the wins of each of the advisors. I get even greater joy when I walk into the office and I look at our collaboration area and I see someone who's been here a while and I know very busy, for example, you, and you see someone, whether they're struggling in a tool, a system, or they're working on a buyer CMA, a seller CMA, and you sit down and take the time. And then I see that person 6 months later doing the same thing.
Yeah.
And just passing that on. And as we've been going through the changes, gosh, for months, we started looking at the documents long before to look at our things to see how can we do better and how can we help each other. And when we have those times of training and seeing people sitting together and knowing they can ask a question, and there's not a silly question because someone else probably is thinking it but scared to ask, and to see how others will answer the question, rubber meets the road in such a respectful way, and even offer, okay, I see you're struggling with that. The next thing you know, I see someone sitting in this conference room taking their time as an independent contractor that I know they don't have, but to help someone understand and feel even more confident. And to me, our office admin, Kathy and Jessica Johnson, our marketing team, and then knowing that we have folks behind us in Florida supporting everybody. And I love hearing what's important to the advisors to see how we can constantly make things better and better.
Yeah, and I think that just to elaborate on what you're saying, and from the advisor's perspective, one of the things that I truly, truly appreciate is how everything trickles down. How all of the education and information and professionalism that we get from Budge,
Mhm.
Budge Husky, our CEO up at the top. He is in constant communication with us, and he will not hesitate to answer any questions that we have as an individual. So just to know that we have that, and that you have that, and that I can pick up the phone and call you at any time of the day or night, and that
Mhm.
you're there for me,
Mhm.
and for any of us. I think that gives, what it does for me is that it gives me the confidence, and it also gives me the I feel like a little bit of a responsibility to make sure that I'm showing that to other people that are coming in here, and whether that be other advisors or clients. And so I really appreciate that, and I really feel it through our brand. So I don't know if that answers anything or adds on to anything, but I love that about it. And then
I do
uh,
too, Jess. And I think that if you think about a president and CEO who has all the hats that Bud does, well, he has all the experience from his dad being in the business and him being in the business all this time. He gets it. But the thing about him is he cares. And so I think we're super lucky to have a president that leads with knowledge and wisdom and passion for the people and for the process.
and to know that he was once boots on the ground
Right.
as well. Like, I mean,
Right.
he was like had blood, sweat, and tears in the real estate industry. And that kind of segues over to another question for you. So, how did you get into the real estate world?
Jess, thanks for asking. It's kind of a negative reason, but you can turn things into a positive. I grew up in Pennsylvania. I moved to Texas, and I felt like the agent was working for the other side, and they were working with me. And I just would ask questions, and it didn't seem like I was important. And I had never bought a house before. So lived in the house, sold. I felt like it was a different agent. I didn't use the same one because I didn't feel the value. But so I used a different agent to list the house. I felt like they were working for the buyer and not me. And then I moved to Ohio. The same thing happened. I moved to North Carolina, and I thought, I love real estate. I love the excitement of watching someone buy and transform, like the process of changing and just watching the values change. And just the whole process has always intrigued me. But it also made me really sad because I knew how I felt. And then I thought, I have a passion for this and I have a passion for people. So I joined a local firm, and I decided that on either side of the transaction, I wanted that client to know I was there for them and I was going to represent them, and I would have the fiduciary responsibility and help them, like you said earlier. It's a lot to help them understand that. So I try to take that same passion in leadership. So then I started my own little company, and then Sotheby's came to me, and I was just kind of like, who little old me? And to your point of being blue, I just love this brand. I love Premier Sotheby's International Realty and the leadership that we have that cares. So,
I'm so glad that they found you.
oh, thanks. Oh, me too.
And then, what is your favorite thing? What is your favorite thing about being in real estate?
My favorite thing about being in real estate, I would say I love the advisors. I love working with the advisors. I love celebrating their wins. Like, I get just so happy when someone calls and I know they went on a listing appointment and I know they were up against somebody else and they get it. Like, it's like a personal joy for me doing a jumping jack. It's just like so exciting to see. And I love that every day is different.
Yeah.
So we can get up and plan for a certain thought of the day. And then we have a little jump in the market, or the weather changes and causes different things to happen. And so every day is different. Yeah.
Thank you.
So Jess, as an advisor, how do you see your day-to-day life changing and education process and your processes regarding your sellers and buyers?
That is a great question. So to kind of go to it from a perspective of like day to day, how's it changing? Everything is situational. Every single person's journey is completely different. So it's really, really important to sit down and get to know people, and like I was talking about earlier, get to know what their goal is. And make sure that I'm providing them with as much information as possible in order to accomplish their goals. So from the perspective of of the new lawsuit and the education that we're providing from the changes that are coming out of that, I think it's important for us to educate our clients that we're super fortunate. We're super fortunate that we are living in a state that already had I want to say like the center of what this lawsuit, like where it came from. They already had all of that in mind whenever they established our goals or our laws in North Carolina. So it wasn't that big of a transition for us. It's like you said earlier, it's just how we disclose and how we document. So now it's our duty to make sure that whenever we're bringing our sellers in, that we're over explaining. And I've always been an over explainer anyway. I was in the hospitality industry, and it's just a general rule of thumb to like say the same thing 3 times, 3 different ways to make sure that your clients understand what's going on and make sure that they're comfortable with moving forward. And I think that's the whole goal. My whole goal is just to make sure that people are comfortable with moving forward and make sure that they're not going to have like a second guess. Everybody has a little bit of a second guess later on, but to alleviate that as much as possible and make sure they're comfortable with me and that they trust me.
I love it. So speaking to that trust level, at Premier Sotheby's International Realty, we use a play on the word premier. And I do believe our advisors here are premier. Tell me what that means to you.
So like you said, our motto is be premier. Our name is premier. I think that the expectation is that our agents, our advisors, because that's what we are, that we provide a premier level of service. I think that we are with a brand that provides us with premier level tools that we're able to give to our clients and our customers to make sure that they have everything at their fingertips if they need it from an information standpoint. And then it's up to us just to make sure that we're articulating everything that's in all of that lovely collateral that's given to them. So I think that to kind of go back to your question though, it's our obligation, it's our duty to provide a extraordinary level of service and being premier.
Awesome. So when I'm a buyer and I say to you, I understand I don't pay you, does that make you nervous, or do you feel so prepared to give them the answer of your value?
So you're saying that if you're a buyer and you came to me and said, I understand that I don't pay you, at that point I'd have to say, I think that we need to take a step back and educate ourselves on what this process looks like, because at the end of the day, in order for us to work together, it is an understanding that it is your obligation to pay me for a service. It is a professional service at that point, and there are different ways that we may be able to work around how the compensation is received, but it is a service to you, so you are responsible for that service.
Excellent. I also feel like now is the time for advisors who do provide excellent service throughout the industry to shine like never before.
Absolutely.
Earlier, you mentioned it's going to weed out those that didn't and don't and won't and can't and maybe don't even know how. But those that do, it's time to elevate ourselves even more and our industry. So I think it's a great opportunity for excellence.
Absolutely. So, I mean, going back to me being in the hospitality industry beforehand, it's a service. Anytime a buyer or a seller comes to me, it's for a service. Anytime someone goes on vacation and they go to the Four Seasons, they're expecting a service. They're expecting a higher level of service. And that's what we provide at Premier Sotheby's International Realty. We provide the best experience that we possibly can for our client because they're paying for the service of ease, comfort, and the responsibility of giving information. So I think that as long as we continue to provide a service, there's never going to be a question as to how compensation is paid. I think that the agents that are in our industry that are not providing that service, then they are definitely it's going to be a hard road for them. And they will eventually just kind of find other positions.
Yeah, I agree. I think that's really well stated.
And thank you again, Jill,
You're so
for coming on and chatting with me. I'm sure that this is going to be such a benefit to all of our clients and customers, our future clients and customers. And hope that everybody knows that if they have any questions, they can reach out to us.
Awesome. Thank you, Jeff.
Thank you.